A Gynecologist's Guide to Reawakening Intimacy After 60. 5 Natural Practices to Reverse Common Mistakes. When we concluded our last video together, I shared with you something of profound importance: the 4 common mistakes that women over the age of 60 often make with the practice of self-pleasure are not at all permanent. They are, in fact, completely and utterly reversible. And today, my sincere wish is to show you exactly how. I have had the distinct privilege of seeing women in their 60s, their 70s, and even their late 80s who had genuinely thought that their capacity for physical sensitivity was gone from their lives forever. They would come into my office and voice the very same quiet and apprehensive questions that you might be having for yourself right now. Is it simply too late for me? Can my body still possibly respond? And my answer to you, as it has always been to them, is a resounding and an unequivocal yes. Your body may have indeed changed, but it has most certainly not given up on you. It is in fact still listening. The profound truth of the matter is that when you are able to correct those hidden and often unconscious mistakes, you will effectively unlock the door to your own personal healing. But please know that a state of awareness on its own is not enough. You also need a set of practical and accessible tools, some gentle, natural, and effective ways to be able to restore your circulation, to reawaken your delicate nerve endings, and to rebuild your precious sense of confidence. And that is precisely what we are going to be covering together today. I am Dr. Lily Stones, a board-certified gynecologist with more than 3 decades of dedicated professional experience guiding women through all of the many different seasons of their lives. In this particular video, I am going to be sharing with you 5 natural and evidence-based practices that can help you to be able to restore your physical sensitivity and your circulation, even after many years or even many decades of some unhelpful and counterproductive habits. And please know that these are not at all any kind of pills, they are not at all any kind of medical procedures, and they are most certainly not any kind of quick fixes. They are, in fact, a series of some simple and some gentle adjustments that you can begin to make for yourself right now in the comfort of your own home and at your very own pace. And if you are able to stay with me until the very end of our conversation today, I will be sure to explain to you which of these 5 powerful practices is able to have the very fastest impact. A great many women are able to notice a significant and a positive difference in just a matter of a week or 2. But before we dive in, I would be so honored to be able to know which of the many different mistakes from our last video was able to resonate with you the very most. Was it the act of rushing? Was it the act of holding your own breath? Was it the act of overdoing it, or was it the act of relying far too much on the use of a fantasy? Please be sure to type your answer for me in the comments section below. Your personal response will be able to help me to know where I can be able to support you the very most. Now let's go ahead and begin with the very first natural way to be able to restore your own body's natural flow and its innate sense of sensitivity. It is incredibly simple, it is completely free of any cost, and it is something that you can begin to practice for yourself the very next time that you are with yourself. The very first and most fundamental natural way is the simple act of slowing down with a profound and with a beautiful sense of an intention. In our very last video together, I had taken the time to be able to explain to you just how the act of rushing can be able to create a form of a circulatory shock in your own body. Your own heart is able to begin to race. Your own delicate blood vessels are able to constrict and to then dilate in a very rapid and in a very uncoordinated way, and your own very delicate tissues are the very ones that are then able to take the hit. And the antidote to all of this is almost deceptively and wonderfully simple: the act of just simply and purely slowing down. I would like for you to please try to think of your own body as being like a beautiful and a delicate orchestra. And if the conductor of that orchestra is to rush through the entire performance, the music will inevitably become chaotic and will lose all of its beautiful harmony. But if that very same conductor is to lead the orchestra with a slow and with a steady and with a graceful hand, the music will then be able to swell in a much more natural and in a much more beautiful way, and every single note will be able to be heard with a profound and with a beautiful sense of a clarity. And your own delicate tissues are able to work in the very same way. And when you are able to allow your own sense of an arousal to be able to build up in a much more gentle and in a much more mindful way, your own delicate blood vessels will then be able to expand expand in a very steady and in a very rhythmic way. And a fresh and a vital supply of oxygen will then be able to reach your own clitoris and your own vaginal walls, and your own sense of a physical sensitivity will then begin to grow. I can still so vividly remember one of my very dear patients, Irene, who was 72 years of age and who had confessed to me that she had been rushing through this particular practice for many, many years. It was just always all about the sense of a relief for me, she had said. And I had then encouraged her to please try to add in just 5 short minutes of a very slow and of a very mindful form of a build-up, one that was focused on her own breath, on her own sense of a touch, and on her own sense of a presence, instead of just simply racing to the finish line. And just 3 short weeks later she had come back to my office absolutely glowing. I did not at all think that just 5 short minutes could possibly be able to change so very much for me, she had told me. But it most certainly did. Her own sense of a circulation had been able to improve, and her own personal sense of a confidence had then followed right along with it. So your very first and your very most important tool is this. I would like for you to please try to treat the experience of an intimacy as if it were a slow and a delicious meal, and not at all as if it were a form of a fast food. And I would like for you to please try to savor it, and I can absolutely and completely promise you that your own body will then be sure to reward you for it. The second natural way is the simple act of a deep and of a profound breathing and of a complete and of a total pelvic relaxation. So very many women will tend to tense up their own core and will also tend to hold their own breath without even at all realizing that they are doing it. And as I had been able to share with all of you before, when you are able to stop your own breathing, you are also able to stop your own flowing. But with a little bit of a consistent and of a mindful practice, you can be able to completely and utterly reverse this particular habit. And here is a very simple and a very gentle exercise that I will so often teach to my own patients in my own office. I would like for you to please try to place one of your own hands on your own belly, and I would then like for you to please try to inhale very slowly through your own nose for a full and a complete count of 4. And I would then like for you to please try to allow your own belly to be able to rise. And I would then like for you to please try to hold your own breath for a gentle and a soft count of 2. And then I would like for you to please try to exhale very slowly through your own mouth for a full and a complete count of 6, and to then just simply allow your own shoulders to be able to drop. And I would like for you to please try to repeat this for a few different and distinct cycles, both before and during the experience of an intimacy. And what is then able to happen in your own body, while your own delicate blood vessels are then able to dilate, a fresh and a vital supply of an oxygen is then able to saturate your own delicate tissues, and your own nervous system is then able to shift from a state of a fight or flight response and into a state of a rest and receive response. And please know that this particular state is not at all just a relaxing one. It is in fact the very same state where the experience of a pleasure is able to live. And in order to be able to make this all a little bit more practical for you, I will so often tell my own patients to please try to pair their own breath with a sense of a release. And as you are beginning to exhale, I would like for you to please try to imagine for just a moment that your own pelvic floor is beginning to soften, just like a beautiful and a delicate flower that is beginning to unfurl its own precious petals. And this very simple and this very powerful visualization can be able to help you to be able to break that very same unconscious habit of a clenching. Take for example the story of Grace. At the age of 68, she had admitted to me that she had so often felt so very numb down there. And we had then taken the time to be able to practice this very same breathing exercise together right there in my own clinic. And she had at first just simply laughed at it. It had all felt so very silly to her. But when she had then been able to try it for herself at home, she had then been able to notice in a matter of just a few short days that a sense of a warmth and of a physical sensitivity had already begun to return to her. It was as if someone had finally been able to turn the lights back on in my own body, she had said to me. And the science is able to fully and completely back this up. According to the esteemed Cleveland Clinic, the practice of a deep and of a diaphragmatic breathing is able to improve your own sense of a circulation, is able to lower your own blood pressure, and is also able to enhance your own parasympathetic activity, the very same part of your own nervous system that is responsible for governing your own sense of an arousal and of a healing. In other words, the simple act of a breathing is not at all optional. It is in fact a very powerful and a very profound form of a medicine. So here is what I would be so very honored if you would please try for yourself tonight. Before you are even able to think about the experience of a touch, I would like for you to please try to spend just 2 short minutes of your own time just simply and purely breathing very slowly, and of just simply and purely allowing your own belly to be able to rise and to be able to fall. And I would then like for you to please try to notice for yourself just how your own body is able to feel right afterwards. The simple acts of a slowing down and of a breathing, these are your very first 2 and your very most important tools. They are simple, they are natural, and they are completely and utterly free of any kind of a cost. And yet when they are used together, they are able to create the very foundation for a healthy and a robust state of a circulation and of a physical sensitivity. But they are only just the very beginning of your journey. Because even if you are able to completely and utterly master these first 2 steps, your own body is still in need of something else, a proper and a sufficient sense of a recovery. Just as your own muscles are not at all able to rebuild themselves without a certain amount of a rest, your own intimate system is also in need of a certain amount of a time in order to be able to properly and to fully reset itself, and that is exactly where we are going to be going next. But before I continue, I would be so very honored to be able to know, have you ever been able to try the practice of a mindful form of a breathing or of a slowing down? And if so, I would be so very grateful if you would please type the word calm in the comments section below. And if not yet, then I would be so very honored if you would please type the word new in the comments section below. And either way, your own personal answer to that question will be able to help another woman to be able to see that she is not at all alone on this particular journey. Now let's go ahead and move on to the third natural way to be able to restore your own sense of a circulation and of your own physical sensitivity after the age of 60, the act of building in a sufficient amount of a recovery time. The third natural way is the simple act of building in a sufficient amount of a recovery time for yourself. I would like for you to please try to think back to the time when you were much younger. You might have been able to exercise very hard on every single day and to then just simply bounce back from it all very, very quickly and to then still feel very energized. But after the age of 60, your own muscles, your own joints, and your own delicate tissues are all in need of a much greater amount of a time in order to be able to properly and to fully repair themselves. And the very same principle is also true for your own intimate system. The practice of a self-pleasure is a very healthy and a very beneficial one. But when it is able to become a daily practice or even a multiple times a day practice, especially when it is done without any kind of a variety, it can actually and truly be able to drain your own precious energy instead of being able to replenish it. And your own delicate nerve endings are in need of a certain amount of a time in order to be able to properly and to fully reset themselves. Your own hormones are in need of a certain amount of a time in order to be able to properly and to fully recalibrate themselves. And your own circulatory system is in need of some very important and of some very integral moments of a rest in order to be able to stay in a strong and in a healthy state. I had a patient by the name of Brenda who was a retired nurse in her early 70s. She had admitted to me that she had been using the practice of a self-pleasure almost every single night, simply in order to be able to help her to be able to fall asleep, but right afterwards she had always been left feeling so much more empty and not at all any calmer. I had simply thought that I was broken, she had told me, and when I had then encouraged her to please try to pause on every other day in order to be able to give to her own body a sufficient chance to be able to rest, she had at first been very, very skeptical of this idea. But just 2 short weeks later she had come back to my office feeling completely and utterly amazed. I am now actually able to look forward to it once again, she had said, and I am now able to feel so very alive and not at all so very drained. I would like for you to please try to think of the act of a recovery as being like the simple and the beautiful process of a nurturing a living and a breathing entity. And if you are to give to it too much of any one single thing, it will not at all be able to thrive. But if you are able to give to it a sense of a balance, it will then be able to grow so much stronger, and your own body is in need of that very same sense of a rhythm. The fourth natural way is the simple act of retraining your own brain away from a state of an overstimulation. And this particular one can be a very difficult one, simply because it is able to touch upon the very habits of our own minds, and not just the very habits of our own bodies. And as we had been able to discuss in our very last video together, a great many women will so often rely on the use of a fantasy, of some romantic novels, or of even some explicit forms of a media, in order to be able to feel a sense of a desire. And while the use of our own imagination can in fact be a very healthy and a very beneficial thing, The experience of too much of an external form of a stimulation can be able to desensitize your own brain, and your own brain is very much like a very sensitive and a very sophisticated piece of equipment. And if you are to keep on using it at its very full and its very maximum capacity, your own internal systems will then begin to adjust, and a much softer and a much more subtle form of a stimulation will then begin to disappear. And in the very same way, if your own brain is able to get used to a constant and a very high intensity form of a stimulation, the experience of a real-life sensation will then begin to feel so very muted. But here is the wonderfully and the beautifully hopeful truth of the matter. Your own brain is in fact plastic, and it can in fact be able to rewire itself, and by simply and gently stepping back from any kind of an overstimulating form of a content, and by simply and gently reconnecting with some much gentler and with some much softer triggers, such as the use of your own sense of touch, of your own sense of scent, of your own memory, or of the use of some beautiful and of some calming music, you will then be able to allow your own brain to be able to remember for itself just how to be able to respond in a much more natural and in a much more beautiful way. One of my very dear patients, Joanne, who was 67 years of age, had bravely decided to take for herself a full 30-day reset, and she had then completely and utterly stopped using any kind of a media, and had instead begun to experiment with a much slower and with a much more mindful form of a touch, and even with the use of some guided forms of a meditation. And at first she had felt very restless, but by the third and final week of her own personal experiment she had then told me, "I can now feel a sense of a warmth once again, and I now feel as though my own body is beginning to wake up." And the science is able to fully and completely support this too. A great deal of a recent research that has been conducted by the National Institutes of Health has been able to clearly show that the dopamine receptors in our own brains, the very same pathways that are responsible for our own sense of a pleasure, can be able to resensitize themselves right after a certain period of a rest, and that simply means that your own brain can be able to regain its own innate ability to be able to enjoy a much subtler and a much more authentic form of a sensation. So if you have in fact been depending on the use of a fantasy or of a media, I would like for you to please try to step back from it, not at all as some kind of a punishment, but as a gentle and as a loving invitation for your very own brain to be able to heal itself. The act of a recovery time and the act of a retraining of your own brain, these are both all about a profound and a beautiful sense of a balance, and they are both able to restore not only your own sense of a circulation but also your own profound and your own beautiful sense of a self. And together with the simple acts of a slowing down and of a breathing, they are all able to form a very powerful and a very effective toolkit for the purposes of reclaiming your own sense of a physical sensitivity. But there is still one more very important and very natural way for you to be able to complete this beautiful picture, and it is one that is able to involve something that you may already have in your very own kitchen cabinet, something that is able to nourish both your own body and your own delicate intimate tissue. And before we move on to that final and very important method, please allow me to ask you, have you ever been able to notice for yourself the very distinct and the very profound difference that can be able to occur when you are able to give to yourself just a day or two of a rest? Or have you ever been able to try the simple act of reducing your own intake of an outside form of a stimulation, just to be able to see for yourself what is able to happen? And please share with me a simple yes if you have ever been able to experiment with this, or a simple not yet if this particular idea is a brand new one for you. And in the very next part of our discussion today, we are going to be talking about the fifth and final natural way to be able to restore your own sense of a circulation and of your own physical sensitivity. A very gentle and a very natural aid that a great many women will so often overlook, but that can in fact be able to make a very real and a very profound difference. The fifth and final natural way is the simple act of nourishing your own body with the help of some beautiful and of some beneficial oils, and with the help of a very gentle and of a very mindful form of a touch. And this is one of my very own favorite recommendations, simply because it is both so very simple and so very powerful. A great many women will already be sure to keep a variety of different and distinct natural oils, such as castor oil, coconut oil, or vitamin E oil in their own homes, but they do not at all often realize just how much these very same oils can be able to support their own sense of a circulation, and of their own intimate and of their own personal comfort after the age of 60. And here is precisely why, as your own natural estrogen levels are able to decline, your own delicate tissues are then able to become so much thinner, and your own delicate blood vessels are then able to become so much more fragile. And all of these very same natural oils are able to provide to you a sense of a lubrication, yes, but they are also able to help you to be able to soften your own delicate tissues, They are able to help you to be able to improve the natural elasticity of your own delicate tissue, and they are also able to help you to be able to encourage a much more healthy and a much more robust flow of your own blood. And when all of these very same oils are able to be applied with a very slow and with a very mindful form of a touch, I would like for you to please try to think of it as being like the simple and the beautiful process of massaging a very rich and a very nourishing lotion into your own very dry skin. And you are not at all just simply and purely soothing that skin, you are in fact also revitalizing. One of my very dear patients, Evelyn, who was 74 years of age, had for so very many years been struggling with a profound sense of a dryness and of a physical discomfort, and she had in fact begun to avoid any and all forms of an intimacy, simply because it had always felt so much more stressful to her than it had ever felt soothing. And I had then suggested to her that she please try a very simple and a very gentle evening routine, the simple act of applying a very small amount of a castor oil with a very gentle and a very circular form of a massage, all around her own pelvic area, and all while she was also pairing it with a very slow and with a very deep form of a breathing. And within just a few short weeks, she had then told me, I am now able to feel so very nourished and not at all just simply and purely relieved, and my own body now feels as though it is able to belong to me once again. And this particular practice is not at all only about your own personal sense of a physical comfort, it is also all about the profound and the beautiful process of retraining your very own nervous system. And when you are able to combine the use of some very beautiful and of some very beneficial natural oils, with the practice of a very mindful and of a very gentle form of a touch, your very own brain will then begin to be able to associate the experience of an intimacy with a sense of a safety, with a sense of a softness, and with a sense of a healing. And that in turn is able to encourage a much deeper and a much more profound sense of a circulation, and of a physical sensitivity. And this is not at all just an anecdotal observation on my part. According to a number of different and distinct studies that have been referenced by the esteemed Mayo Clinic, the simple act of maintaining the health of your own skin and of your own delicate tissues, with the help of some very natural and of some very beneficial emollient, can be able to reduce the incidence of any kind of a microtrauma. It can be able to improve your own blood vessel response, and it can even be able to support the process of a nerve regeneration over the course of time. And it is so very remarkable to me just how such a very small and such a very simple step can be able to create such a very powerful and such a very profound ripple effect all across your very own body. But here is what I so very deeply and so very profoundly need for you to be able to know. While all of these very same natural shifts can in fact be able to completely and utterly transform your own personal experience, there is also another very important and very integral piece of this entire puzzle that we have not at all yet been able to address, one that is able to explain to all of us exactly why the experience of an intimacy is able to feel so very different after the age of 60. And it is not at all about any kind of a mistake, it is in fact all about your own personal biology. And after the onset of your own menopause, your own hormones are able to change in a very dramatic and in a very profound way, and your own estrogen, your own progesterone, and even your own testosterone levels are all able to decline. And all of those very same changes do not at all just affect the experience of any kind of a hot flash or of any kind of a mood swing. They are in fact able to reshape your own sense of a circulation, your own delicate tissues, and the very same way that your own brain is able to respond to the experience of a touch. And this is the much deeper and the much more profound layer of all of this that so very many women will so often overlook, and they will so often think to themselves that there must be something that is wrong with me, when in reality, their own bodies are just simply and purely responding to a series of some very profound and of some very powerful hormonal shifts that no one has ever taken the time to be able to explain to them. And that is precisely why in the very next episode of this particular series I am going to be taking all of you on a journey deep down inside of that very same hormonal puzzle, and you will be able to learn for yourself exactly why a declining level of an estrogen is able to change your own sense of a circulation and of your own physical sensitivity. You will be able to learn for yourself about the very surprising and the very important role that the hormone testosterone is able to play in the experience of a female intimacy after the age of 60. And you will also be able to learn for yourself about all of the many different and distinct options, both natural and medical, that are currently available to you if you should ever want to be able to support your own body in a much more safe and in a much more effective way. And if you have ever found yourself asking, is this just a normal part of the aging process? Is it my own hormones, or is it both? Then the third episode of this series is the one that you cannot at all afford to be able to miss. It will be able to connect every single thing that we have been able to learn so far, and it will also be able to set the stage for the final 2 episodes of this series, where we will be sure to explore a variety of different and distinct natural aids and oils, and also the much bigger and the much more profound picture of a redefining of the experience of an intimacy in our own later years of life. So here is my final and my most heartfelt invitation to you. I would like for you to please try to take just one of the 5 different and distinct practices from our discussion today, and to then just simply make a commitment to yourself to be able to practice it for this entire. And then I would be so very honored if you would please join me in our very next video, where we will be sure to uncover just how your own hormones are currently shaping your own intimate health, and what you can be able to do about it. I'm Dr. Lily Stones, and from my heart to yours, I thank you so very much for having been here with me today. And please know that you are so very worthy of a sense of a physical sensitivity. You are so very worthy of a sense of a vitality. And you are so very worthy of a sense of a pleasure that is able to last for a lifetime. And I will be sure to see you in our 3rd episode, where we will be sure to reveal all of the many different and distinct hormonal secrets that every single woman who is over the age of 60 is so very much in need of being able to know. And before we close, let me remind you, this video is for educational purposes only. It does not replace medical advice. Every woman's body is unique. If you are experiencing pain, significant changes, or have personal concerns, please consult with your healthcare provider. Your well-being deserves personalized care.